Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's broadcast. It's live here tonight on YouTube Live, on Facebook Live, and on StreamYard. My name is Sly Rose. I am the host of the Indiana Rock Machine. And coming up tonight, we have our guest. His name is Dale Lawrence. So, Dale, say hello to everybody tonight.
Hello.
I'd like to thank Dale so much for joining us. Dale has got a great Indiana background. We're going to be talking about that and the progression of where he started to where he is now. It's kind of like the Indiana history of rock and roll viewed through the eyes of the individuals that actually did it. So we may not go on to the great picture, but we're very interested in the Indiana part, how you got started in Indiana, how you progressed through Indiana, maybe went away for a while, came back to Indiana. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be doing on the Indiana Rock Machine. And Dale has agreed to come on here. So I wanted Dale to come on the show for a long time. Dale and I grew up in the same area. We also went to the same school, and our school was so small. This sounds like a setup for a bad joke, but our school was so small in LaPorte County that kindergarten through 12 were all in the same building. So I've known of Dale for a long time. Today is my first time I actually got to talk to him. I've watched him on video. I've held his record covers in my hand. So what I'd like to do, Dale, is kind of get an idea of like where you were born, where you grew up. I kind of blew that story there for you, but where are you from? Where did you get your start?
I was born in Valparaiso and grew up one county over on a farm outside Hanna, Indiana, a very tiny town, and went to South Central as did you.
Yep.
What else do you need to know?
Well, just kind of interested. We're going to talk just a little bit about the end of your high school days, because that kind of moves us into the music thing. But when you were young and you were growing up on a farm in Hanna, I grew up in a little tiny town called Union Mills, which they're kind of like, 5 miles apart. But what kind of music, what was your music influence? What got you interested in music in this little town?
Well, I was interested in music for as long as I can remember. Records. We had little RCA phonograph that just played 45s and a lot of 45s, which I'm not exactly sure where they came from. But I was obsessed with those. And a handful of them were rock and roll records. My Little Margie by Fats Domino, Wake Up Little Susie. There was a Bill Haley single, Shake, Rattle, and Roll, and ABC Boogie, and Witch Doctor, if that counts.
Oh, David Seville. Always a big fan of David Seville.
Yep. So I loved records and loved music ever since I can remember. And getting interested in rock and roll happened when I was 9, I think, when I found out about the radio. I remember I was on the school bus and I heard a song I really liked, and I wish I could remember for sure what it is, because in my mind it was Runaway by Del Shannon, but that doesn't make sense year-wise. It's about 3 years off, because this would have been 1965. And I remember thinking, gosh, I really like that song. I don't know what it is. I'll never hear it again. And then the next day I heard it again on the radio. And I think my mom had explained to me that, yeah, the radio, that's how it works. They play this stuff over and over.
Yeah.
And I was hooked then. WLS, Dex Card and the Silver Dollar Survey. Just really big into rock and roll from then on.
Well, that's great, because where we grew up, you spent a lot of time on the bus. So you would, the really popular songs would play every hour. So if we heard the song at 7 a.m. on the way to school, we'd hear it the next day at 7 a.m. on the way to school. I mean, we had a pretty good bus ride there. So I know that you're a Buddy Holly fan, and you've done some stuff on Buddy Holly in the past on NPR, on actually a show called All Things Considered. And what it was about the Buddy Holly apartment sessions. What exactly are those?
It's the last recordings that he ever made. He recorded on a portable tape recorder in his apartment, just him and the guitar, mostly an acoustic guitar, but he uses an electric on a few of them. And they're amazingly intimate, wonderful recordings, most of which, following his death, were overdubbed and released on various records. But the original recordings, undubbed with just him, are really great and sound great. I was trying to write an article about them, and I was looking around for who would be interested, and someone suggested I contact NPR, which I thought was a really long shot, but they were interested. And
there are links still out there for that show. If you do a search for Dale Lawrence and All Things Considered, you can actually listen to that, because it's some really interesting stuff. I listened to it the other night, and they actually have 3 of the songs that you can play that are linked right there to your story. So it's really, really good. So I really dug that. That was fantastic. Growing up where we did, I mean, we had Roxy Music, the Roxy Music store in LaPorte.
The store and the band.
Yeah, exactly. So what was your first instrument? Where did you get an instrument? Did Santa Claus drop one down the chimney for you, or did he give you a xylophone, or what was your first instrument that you picked up?
Well, the first instrument I learned to play was trombone, if that counts, in the band. But I wanted a guitar. Yes, I asked for one for Christmas, and I got it probably the next year, probably 5th grade. And self-taught. Well, no, I skipped piano. I did take piano lessons, but I never took guitar lessons. I just taught myself to play it. And yeah, bought a lot of stuff at Roxy Music in LaPorte.
How about that? I got my first Squire Strat at Roxy Music there in LaPorte. What a great store it was. A vanishing breed of those. Do you have a memory of seeing rock and roll on TV that just kind of went, man, I've got to do this? I mean, we heard the records, on the bus ride, and that was like, man, I really dig this stuff. But do you remember a TV moment? Like some people will say the Beatles, the Ed Sullivan Show. Do you have a memory like that?
For me, it was probably the Monkees. I mean, I watched Hullabaloo and all that, Shindig. I watched all those shows and was also excited when bands would turn up on variety shows. The Beatles thing, I remember, but not in a good way. We were at my aunt's house, and my cousin Wayne and his friend Gerard came home and said, we got to see the Beatles. And they made me switch the TV from Walt Disney to Ed Sullivan. So it was just an annoyance to me that night. But a year later, I understood.
Yeah, I mean, the young ones these days don't know about appointment TV, because you can just stream whatever you want to when it is. But the Beatles are going to be on, or I know that Batman's going to be on at, when we get home from school, or the Monkees. I just went and saw actually Mike and Mickey last week, their show. Big Monkees fan myself. We're going to talk a little bit about the Monkees later. We're not going to drone on about it, but there's a cute, cool little thing that you guys did a little bit later that that did kind of incorporate some Monkey stuff. So we talked earlier
2 years ago.
Yeah. Good show. Really good show.
It's the only time I've seen them, but I thought it's kind of a perfect storm, because they're the two Monkees you really wanted to see, and it was great, and it wasn't a lot of schlocky comedy. It was the music, and I heard almost everything I wanted to hear. So I said, well, I was only going to see them once. This was the night to see them. Right.
The Nesmith stuff is the strongest, and that's what they tend to do with Mike and Mickey. So those are great shows. Did you have a band? Like when I was in high school, we had a garage band, right? But we didn't have anywhere to play. It was like you went to a building that was either a burned out building and you took an extension cord, or you went to someone's basement. So were you in a band like that in high school, and where did you play out in the farmlands like we did?
There was not much of it. It was the same thing when I was growing up. Yeah, we had a garage band. It was called Sway. and we practiced in my basement, and I'm thinking we played out maybe 3 times, parties, or we did arrange to have the school cafeteria one night. But that was it. Yeah, it was fun to do, but you're right, there was nowhere to play.
Do you happen to remember any songs from your set list? I mean, because I know that we used to do Last Train to Clarksville. That was one that we did every single time. Did you have a song like that you guys did?
We did a Creedence Clearwater album track called Pagan Baby. We would close with that. I know we did Cinnamon Girl by Neil Young. Those are the ones that are coming to mind.
That's great. I mean, it's hard to remember bits and pieces like that, but it's just it's kind of like a time capsule of here are the songs that we practiced and practiced and practiced, and we thought they were so good that we wanted to do them. So that I just kind of wanted to get your feel for that high school thing, because ours was I made the guys do the Monkees, then they made us do Leonard Skinner and stuff like that. So we're kind of like at different ends. We had creative differences. As you would say. So just interested to hear what was that. Now you did that kind of playing in high school, and then you graduated from high school, and then you went where?
To Indiana University, Bloomington.
So when you were at IU, when you went to Bloomington, did you go down there and the first thing you said is, I need to get in the band, I need to play rock and roll? Or did you kind of get wrapped up in the thing and then kind of find guys that were interested?
It wasn't that at all. It wasn't, I got to be in a band. And I wasn't in a band until my senior year. And by that time, I had kind of given up. You know, I mean, when you're in high school, you think, yeah, that would be great to do, to be in a band. And then after 3 years of college, it kind of seemed like just a sentimental pipe dream or something. And then I heard the Sex Pistols, and the whole world changed. I had, the usual records you had then, Marquee Moon and Modern Lovers and all that. But hearing the Sex Pistols was different. They sounded exactly how it felt to be alive just then, and how frustrating it was, and how awful everything was. And it made it seem like the world had other possibilities. And then, yeah, all of a sudden, I really did want to be in a band again.
How did you get turned on to that? Did somebody say, I've got a record you have to listen to, or did you happen to hear it on the radio, or what did that?
Well, you read about the Sex Pistols more than you hear them. Mm-hmm. The first time I heard them was on the radio, oddly enough, but just kind of playing in the background at a New Year's party. Someone had WXRT on, and I heard a little bit of Anarchy in the UK. And I bought one of their singles that summer at Hegwish Records in Cal City. Mm-hmm. Again, without thinking that much of it. When I went back to IU my senior year, my friend Robert had the God Save the Queen single, and he said, you've got to hear this, and both sides of that are just great. And I immediately went out and bought that. You could buy the import symbols at Karma. Mm-hmm. So that was it. When I heard that, and then Holidays in the Sun came out, like I said, those had a bigger impact on me than probably any records in my life, because I don't think I probably wouldn't have ever been in a band again if it wasn't for them. And I certainly wouldn't have been in bands my whole life.
Describe to me the punk scene in Bloomington at that
point. There was not one. There was not one at all. It was so lonely. I wanted to be in a band, but I didn't know anybody that liked this stuff. Gulcher Records put an ad in the local weekly, saying, we're looking for a third band for our new wave roster or something like that. Inquire. And I sent an inquiry in, and the Gulcher guy came to my house, and it turned out what they were actually trying to do was to build a backup band for Ted Nemick, who had been one of the original Gizmos, a studio-only band who I wasn't really familiar with. And that wasn't really what I wanted to do, but they told me I I'd contribute input. I can write songs, and so I did that. I was hired on as the rhythm guitarist in sort of the intermediary version of the Gizmos between the original lineup and then eventually the lineup that I fronted the band in.
The Gizmos is kind of like a split story, right? There was a excuse me, there was an original group that started maybe like in 76 to 78. Then there was some quiet time, and then that's kind of where you came in.
Yeah,
right after that quiet period.
It was 1977, and the band, it never really existed as a band that played out, but it didn't exist in any way by then. But Gulcher wanted to try to make a band that could play out, and they had one Gizmo around, Ted Nemec, so he fronted the band, and that lineup only lasted a semester. Ted was a pre-med student and finally decided that those two worlds weren't going to mix.
Yeah, there was more money to be made elsewhere, right?
Right.
So then, what I remember of Gulcher, now tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, because I was just kind of a little bit late to that scene, but I seem to remember Gulcher Records also being a record store right off of Kirkwood. So they were a record store trying to do their own label. Is that what was going on? Because there was a Gulcher imprint.
Right. They also had a fanzine, which was called Gulcher. I think that was where the Gulcher name came from. I think that predated both the record store and the label. And it was a reference to Bloomington, apparently, at some point was called the Gulch. Mm-hmm. I never really heard it called that, but that's where the name Gulcher came from. And yeah, they put out a record pretty much just to amuse themselves, and they got noticed. It was reviewed in Cream. It was sort of pre-punk, funny garage stuff.
Now I remember, I remember seeing some videos on YouTube, and YouTube is a great gold mine to find. I think there are some videos of that original group that may have coalesced to do some bar gigs. Is that true? Is there that
Not back then.
Gizmo?
They played maybe twice back then, but yet more recently they've gotten back together and done some shows. Yeah.
Okay, so that explains that, because I was wondering what the Gizmos, if the factions had split and one has gone on to, to do production, to do songs, to do gigs, that sort of thing. But the Gizmos were, because there was no scene in Bloomington, or probably in southern Indiana or central Indiana, there was no punk scene there. That's what is just so interesting about your story, how you were there at the very, very beginning. And it seems like, to me, from a million miles away, it seemed like punk was definitely British. The punk was definitely going on there. And then it moved to New York, and it seemed like that was the epicenter in the United States. And there just wasn't much anywhere else. Is that kind of the way it was?
There were little scenes everywhere, I'm assuming. But most of them, especially in the middle of the country, were kind of like ours was, which is non-existent. We were sort of the start of it. And yeah, it was really hard to get people interested, because for one thing, the term punk rock didn't have much meaning for most people. This was, Bruce Springsteen was the epitome of cool then.
Right.
And we played most of the bars in Bloomington one time, and that was it. We had a slightly better luck in Indianapolis. But it was just either we were sort of tolerated as a novelty act, or we were reviled as incompetent. Either of which was better than being ignored, which we were that a lot too.
So when you're trying to get gigs, I mean, once you guys had formed and start doing music and that sort of thing, who was in charge of the band to go to the bars and say, I've got this great idea, here's our band, will you play us? Did you take a tape, or did you take a cassette, or what did you do?
At the beginning, it was Gulcher. It was Bob Richard, who was Gulcher Records. And he managed the band, at least for a while. And it was him, and he was lucky enough to have had these records out, this EPs, small 45s, that got press, that, like I said, got some national press. And so he used that. But then when we actually got to the shows, the clubs were usually appalled at what they thought.
I just love that. I love that angle because it's like, here's something so new and so great, you know. And having worked in the bars in Bloomington myself, at Jake's and that sort of thing, it's the cover capital of the world, right?
Right.
You're there to play covers. And did you guys have any covers in your set list, or were you doing all originals?
We had some covers, but they weren't like cover band covers. They weren't current hits. What we did we did a punked up version of "Take Me to the River" before the Talking Heads did. We did a Flying Burrito Brothers song, also making it virtually unrecognizable. So you know, it was fun to do covers, but they weren't covers that people that saw cover bands wanted to hear.
So you said some of the bars kind of they reviled you, or they after you'd played once. So that tells me is that you're starting to play local, and those bridges sound like they're getting burned maybe a little bit along the way. And does that mean that you're going to Indianapolis, you're going to Lafayette, you're going to Madison, you're spreading your spider web through the central Indiana area?
Yeah, Indianapolis mainly. We played Lafayette, I think, just once with our friends, and we played Detroit once. But it was mostly Bloomington and Indy, and we only tried it for about a year and a half, and then decided we would move to New York. There was a great show. The Bluebird wouldn't book us, but there was a battle of the bands that took place there over a number of weeks. On Mondays and Tuesdays, there'd be like 5 or 6 bands a night, and our plan was to disrupt everything. The original plan was to keep playing past our half-hour allotment.
Yeah.
But we never got to do that because after about 20 minutes, the dancing on the dance floor got a little violent, and one of the promoters got the wind knocked out of him. And he then tried to stop our set, and it was utter chaos. People were booing and yelling, and a friend of ours leapt to the stage and tried to wrestle the microphone away from this guy and telling everyone that he was a fraud and not to listen to him, and then kissed him on the lips. And all of which resulted in our being banned from ever setting foot in the Bluebird again.
Oh boy. So that was the Bluebird story. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you had a Bluebird story, and that's a great one.
Yeah, we couldn't drink in the band or in the bar after that, let alone play there.
So what I'd like to do, if I can, is I'd like to play one of my favorite songs by the Gizmos. And I have to admit, I was kind of there after the fact. You guys had, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but you guys had kind of left town and moved on to bigger and better things. But what was left behind for us were record albums that I was a big fan of Ozarka Records, which might have been a little bit of a competition for Gulcher. They were kind of like down the street from one another at one point. But that the great Gizmos record, with the other side being Dow Jones and the Industrials. So I was able to see that record, and I go, on the Gizmo side, it says Dale Lawrence. Well, that name really looks familiar. So what I did is I kind of did some research, and I found out it was Dale that I grew up about, I don't know, 6 miles from, that I found on a record label. So let's go ahead and watch really quick one of the great songs by the Gizmos. Well, that's fantastic. I'm going to go out on a limb here, Dale, and I'm going to say that was probably lip synced.
Good eye.
That's fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I thought maybe it was filmed at the IU School of Telecommunications, where I graduated from, but you said it wasn't. You said, where was that filmed?
At Channel 4 at WTTV or WTTW. Someone called us and said, "Do you want to tape 15 minutes of gizmos?" And I really don't know why they did. It was just before we moved. We left town that spring, so it was right before we moved that we went in and did that, and it was fun. It was silly.
It looks great. I mean, it's like a critic's favorite word, so full of angst. And I just love the fact that the performance was more important than actually syncing up the vocals to the performance.
Right.
So I've got a picture here of this group. Do you happen to remember the names of these gentlemen that are in here with you?
Oh, certainly. That's me on the left. Then Billy Nightshade, who was the bass player and also wrote and sang. Shadow Myers was our drummer, and on the far right is Tim Carroll, who went on. He's had quite a solo career himself. He's in Nashville. He didn't write back then, but he's become a very prolific songwriter. He's had songs covered by John Prine and Asleep at the Wheel and all kinds of.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Here's a picture of you guys out in, it looks like Dunn Meadow, if I'm not wrong.
You know, I remembered it as being Dunn Meadow too, and I've been told that it wasn't. It was another outdoor field. It's on the IU campus, yes.
Okay. And that's the same group of guys. How long were you guys together with these four? How long were these four people in the band?
About 2.5 years, a year and a half in Bloomington, and then we moved to New York City.
I want to talk about that move to New York City here, but I do have to show everybody this record album sleeve, and I just love this. It's just so 1980 to me. Do you have anything to say about Dow Jones and the Industrials? Did you guys ever do shows together, or do you know them? Or
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they came down to Bloomington. We were playing at a bar called the Bass Saloon, which actually was the one place that booked us twice in Bloomington. And then they wouldn't after that again. So this is our second show there, and there were two guys in the audience that we didn't recognize, which should have been a red flag. And they started dancing very loopy to our music, and then they came in and introduced themselves. It was Chris Clark, who went by the name Dow Jones, and Greg Horn, and they gave us the tape of their band, and we were knocked out by it, and also just so glad to meet anybody else that was doing this, because like I say, it was hard to get people interested in Bloomington. And so yeah, we recorded that album up there at the keyboard player's studio. And we played a handful of times together. We played a party in Lafayette together. We played one show in Bloomington, and we played a couple nights in Indianapolis together.
It seemed to me like they were like the Lafayette wing, and you guys were the Bloomington wing.
That's exactly right.
You had the heartland of Indiana kind of surrounded there. Was there anybody doing something similar in Indianapolis?
Yeah, there was. There were several bands. Well, eventually it was the Zero Boys, which was about a year later, who were an incredibly good band. At the time, I remember a band called Latex Novelties.
Yep.
That when they started out, mostly were doing like Ramones covers and things like that, but they were carrying the torch.
That is fantastic. I'm going to do this here real quick. And when we talk about the Gizmos, you mentioned moving. I know some of your songs mention the Midwest, but then you guys decided to go New York. What was the impetus for that? Did you guys just pick up, load yourself in a 65 Impala, and just head to New York, and we're going to make it? Or what was going on in the background there?
We wanted to move somewhere because we didn't think. Well, we were just tired of beating our head against the wall in Bloomington. And we didn't think there was any future there. We were wrong, but we wanted to move somewhere. We had friends in New York who were saying, why don't you come out here? You can live with us for a while and try to get established out here in New York. They lived in Hoboken, actually. And so that's why we went out there.
Where did you live? I mean, did you just show up one night and go, we got it? And like, what goes on with that? It's pretty serious stuff.
Well, like I say, we had this. We knew we were going to stay with them at least for a while.
Okay.
We were going to live there. There were, God, how many of us were living there? 7, I think. 7 people, maybe 8. And we just had a new drummer in that video. That was the drummer that we took to New York because our regular drummer Shadow was married and had a job in Indianapolis and wasn't interested in moving. So we got this guy from Ellettsville named Crash Kinzer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the first time Crash had been outside of Indiana, and he lasted exactly 1 week. We got up one morning and he was not there. He had gotten up in the middle of the night and packed his drums and caught a Greyhound back to Bloomington.
Well, I would say it might be a little bit easier to find a fill-in musician in New York than it would have been maybe to find one in Bloomington that had the same sensibilities when it came to punk.
Yeah, but it still took time.
Yeah.
We did eventually find a good drummer in Robbie Wise. But playing out there was not a lot of fun. There was no connection. We felt like we were playing in a void in Bloomington, but out east, we found out what a void really was because there was no continuity from one gig to another. It was never any the same audience members. We never got a foothold. We were kind of naive to think that we would. I think we made some really good recordings out there. We had fun. I don't think any of us regretted it. We got a lot of experience just with living out there for a few years. But if we'd stayed in Bloomington, Bloomington did come around. By the time I moved back, the IU campus was full of people with buzz cuts and colored hair, and none of that was there when we left.
So when you're in New York, how do you make ends meet? Are you playing a lot? Are you playing like 3 or 4 nights a week, or are you guys working in restaurants? I mean, how did you make ends meet?
We're working various day jobs. I worked a lot of temp jobs. As a typist, you could be hired as a typist back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I was eventually hired on from a temp job full time with Union Carbide. And it was a good deal. They were getting ready to move, and when they did, I got all kinds of severance pay.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. Here I am. It's my second job, and I get some actually cash out of it. That's awesome. So Union Carbide, I believe they did some work with Duracell batteries, maybe, if I remember right.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I was always a poor musician. I was more of the radio guy. I was on the radio in Bloomington after you had gone, and maybe after you had come back, and I DJ'd in the clubs there too. So I was always enthralled with musicians who could actually quit a day job and just play music. I mean, there are some that do that, but when you're in college, it's like that's a dream come true. I just want to play music the whole time and never have to worry about a job. And then you go to New York and you find out you kind of still do.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly true.
Yeah. So, what year did you come back then? We're gonna move on from the Gizmos now and kind of move into the middle phase before we get to the other band that a lot of people know about. So, when did you get back to the Bloomington area? You talked about moving back.
I moved to Indianapolis in very late 1982, and was playing again by 83. I moved back to Indy because the Gizmos drummer, who was by far the best musician in the group, Dave Myers, also known as Shadow Myers, was in Indianapolis. And he said, if you move back here, I'd be glad to play with you. So I knew I had a drummer at least. That's why I went to Indy. And yeah, we had a band called the Satellites, which was, we did a fair number of the Gizmo songs, but it was kind of different too. I was kind of tired of the distorted guitar sound and wanted to do something with a cleaner guitar sound. And in New York, we had started writing a little more melodically or rockabilly influenced or something, and so I continued that too, and played in the Satellites for 3 years, I think.
So the Satellites just happened to be our high school mascot, which I thought was very interesting when I heard that. So I didn't know if that was something Freudian that might have happened, but if you'd chosen that name, or maybe somebody else had. But I'm curious, as you can tell, as you can see over my shoulder, I'm a guitar aficionado. I can't play them worth a damn, but I sure love the way they sound, and I sure love the feel of them. I can imagine in a punk band in New York City, I'm trying to imagine the guitar you had, and I'm trying to imagine the condition of it and the amplifier. Can you talk anything about your gear while you were in New York City, or was it in pieces, or what?
I played the red Melody Maker that I bought at Roxy Music when I was in high school. I played that all through the Gizmos and through a Sears Silvertone amp that I also bought in LaPorte, but off of an ad in the paper.
It wasn't Craigslist. It wasn't Craigslist. There was no Craigslist back then. It was a newspaper ad, right?
Yeah, it was the Herald Argus. It said guitar amplifier for sale, and I went and bought that there. And yeah, that's the only guitars and amp that I used through the Gizmos anyway.
And it came back in one piece. Do you still have it?
I still have part of it. I don't have all of it.
That's why I was asking. I was wondering if it was in pieces now. Or if
I still have the guitar, but
okay.
it won't stay in tune.
Got it. That's I'm not going to deviate too much from this because it's about you, but I just remember one of my memories when I was a kid. My uncle was a guitarist, and he would travel around with his guitar amp in Michigan, and he would play at bars, just him by himself. And I remember him coming to our basement in Union Mills, and my parents had just built their house, and we had a housewarming party, and he was playing in the basement, and I was 8, 9 years old, something like that. And he turned on his amp. I think he had a twin reverb, and he was a great guitar player. But the thing I remember, you have these memories that stick with you, right? And I just remember the smell of that tube amp when it got warm. And that's the thing. I mean, I'm a tube guy too, just because of that smell, like that ozone, that warm smell. And if it had been gigged, it had that little bit of a smoke smell to it also. So that's my memory of I want to play guitar when I get older, because it wasn't the guitar, it was the smell of the tube.
The smell of the tubes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great smell. And I'm a tube guy too. I play through Fenders, through old Fenders, black faces that have tubes.
What choice? What is your choice? What do you when a Boatman gig is going on, what are you playing on stage?
A Gretsch Tennessean through a Fender Bandmaster.
Nice. So after the Satellites, we're going to move through the chronology here. And you went to a band, or did you start at the Right to Left band?
A couple friends came to me and said, "Hey, if you want to play, we'll play with you." It was a bass player and drummer who were in another band called the Math Bats. But they said, because I hadn't been playing in about a year, and they said, "We'll do this." And I said, "Well, all right." And we practiced and worked up a little set. And our first show was opening for the Replacements in Indy. And after a couple shows, the drummer said, "No, I don't want to do this anymore." And so I got Shadow back again, and went through a number of guitarists. before settling with Matt Speak, who I still play with today.
Nice. That's great. So you did a couple recordings. When you recorded the couple songs with Right to Left, where did you record those?
Oh, I think it was at Hit City. There's a studio here called Hit City. Through the Satellites, Dave Langfit, who was in the Satellites, co-owned Hit City. At first, he did it out of his garage, and eventually they moved into a more professional space. But that was great because I got to be in the studio a lot through him, and he was a really good guitarist, and he could sing harmony, which was a luxury. I'd never had that in the Gizmos or any other band. So he was a really important connection and a great guy. And so I think that the Right to Left recordings we did were also done at Hit City. I'm pretty sure.
Where was that? What part of town? Do you remember?
Yeah, 54th and College. It's still there, although Dave's
okay.
no longer involved, but it's still there.
It's still called Hit City.
Yep.
That's fantastic. The hours you can spend in the studio are incredible. You step in there and it seems like you look and I've been here for 5 hours. A lot of people really, really like that. But what kind of equipment were you recording when Right to Left went in there? Do you remember, was it an 8-track? Was it a 4-track? Do you happen to remember what kind of equipment you recorded on back then? This isn't a test. You don't have to remember. I'm just curious.
I think it was an 8-track.
Nice.
I think it was an 8-track.
So couple songs were on that was in 88 and 87, right? The tape, Right to Left on tape, and then the Black Brittle Frisbee collection.
Right.
Okay.
It was a compilation, yeah.
Got it. So is this kind of like the going from the Gizmos to the more melodic stuff? Because I think you're moving in that direction at this point with that band. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. So one thing I did notice, I was watching a few videos over the last week or so, and when you guys actually had a lot of stuff recorded at the patio, and one of the videos at the patio actually showed the Vulgar Boatman people doing actually a Gizmo song. I think it might have been Pay, or it might have been one of the other ones. Did you ever pull those songs? Did you pull those out on occasion, or were they chestnuts? It's like, hey, let's do this one tonight, or was it usually a part of your show at that point?
Cry Real Tears was always pretty regular, and that's on the first Boatman album. And we still do that one, and The Midwest Can Be All Right we do fairly often. When I first moved back to Indy, we would do more of them. And Heartbeat was started out as a Gizmo song. So those are the three that we still play a lot. But in the 80s, I know we did more of them.
Well, what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and move into the Vulgar Boatman, because I think a lot of our viewers are pretty familiar with them. So I'm going to we're going to go past this, and we're going to go into this album cover here. And I realize that this album cover is probably a little later, couple years later than the right at the very beginning. But we've got some great pictures of here you guys performing live. This did you say this might be at Shuba's? Is this?
Yeah, I think it is. Yes.
Shuba's. Okay, and this is the current. Is this ultra current version of the band that's playing now?
The version of the band that's playing now are all sitting there, with augmented by Robert Ray on the left and Kathy Collada on the viola. The other four are still the members that play out when we do play out.
Perfect. So I wanted to get that a picture of that. When we move to the Vulgar Boatman, I know there's still quite a. I mean, I know you have quite a following here, and I know you played a lot in Indianapolis at the patio and places like that. Did you say there were people in the Right to Left band that kind of got moved in with the Vulgar Boatman? Did you guys kind of maybe morph into that, or maybe change your name or something? How did that exactly work?
Well, the Vulgar Boatmen started in Florida before either myself or Robert Ray were involved. Robert's a friend of mine I met at IU, and he joined the Boatmen down there initially as a rhythm guitarist. And when their main songwriter, Walter Salas Humara, moved from Gainesville to New York, they needed some new songs to do, and they started doing some Gizmo songs. They did Cry Real Tears and Heartbeat, Tilt-A-Whirl, and a newer song I had called Stop Alternating. And Robert changed the lyrics to some of them and added a bridge, wrote a new bridge for Tilt-A-Whirl. And those were our first collaborations. And then we just started writing songs through the mail. We'd send cassettes back and forth. And his band there would do the songs, and my band here would do the songs. And the longer we kept at it, the two bands basically had the same repertoire. And it came time to record an album, and we just decided to pool our resources. And so there's members of both bands that are on the first album. It was recorded in Florida. You're talking about how great it is to hang out in studios and play there and record, which it is. But the turning point for us was when we started recording at home. We ventured into studios any number of times over the years, including the first time we tried doing both India and Florida band together was in Memphis. We rented time at Ardent over the holidays one year and recorded, and we thought that was pretty cool until we got the tapes home and we thought, gee, we're playing everything really fast and everything sounds really brittle and tinny, and we never did anything with those. Recording in Robert's den on a 1/4-inch 8-track was such a luxury because we could take our time with everything. We were under no kind of pressure. I'd go down there for a couple weeks at a time, and we could get exactly the take we wanted. We could get exactly the sound we wanted. We obsessed over drum sounds and guitar sounds. And that, again, was just a big turning point for us. The first album sounds really good, at least it did to us. And the first album got noticed. We got a lot of really good press. And it got a fair amount of airplay, including a few commercial stations, notably WXRT in Chicago. We had a bona fide hit on WXRT with Drive Somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that was close enough that we could play there 9-10 times a year for a while.
Now, was that like in 1989, 1990? Was that time frame?
Yeah, the album came out in late 89, and it was in 90 when it broke, when we got a lot of press and when it broke in Chicago.
And I love the story about you sending cassettes back and forth. It just seems so old-fashioned, first of all, the mention of cassette, and that you would, what did you send, when you sent that cassette, that's a pretty popular history point in your history, but what exactly was on that cassette? Was that a fully fleshed out song? Was it just you singing with a guitar, like a demo? What was exactly on those? And then what would he send you back?
Oh, it could be anything. More often than not, it was me with a guitar, but it could be a whole song. It could be a melody that I was just humming. It could be just a little snatch of something. And likewise, Robert could send me the exact same things. And it was great because you had 2 sets of ears to hear rhythmic settings, double the chances of getting good lyrics. Often I'd have a song and it would need a bridge, and Robert would write the bridge. Robert wrote more lyrics than I did. So yeah, there was no set methodology. We could send whatever it was that we had, whatever we came up with.
I was never sure how you two had met because I thought he was like at the University of Florida in Gainesville, but he actually was in Bloomington for a while before moving there. Is that how that happened?
He was in grad school at IU when I was an undergrad. And we were both in the same department, film studies through comparative literature. but we met not in a film class. It was in a class on song lyrics, of all things. He was the assistant in that class. The first half of the class was about song lyrics and the differences between poetry and lyrics. The second half of the class Robert taught, and it was more or less a survey of American 20th century popular music. And he dropped in class one day that he had seen Elvis. He grew up in Memphis, and he had seen Elvis pre-RCA. He had seen him when he was still on Sun. And I immediately scheduled office hours so I could talk with him.
Nice.
And we hit it off and found that our tastes in both music and movies were just incredibly similar. And we've been great friends ever since. And neither of us were in bands then. And we didn't start writing together for a number of years. When we did start writing together, like I said, he was in Florida then, where he had gotten a job at the university as a professor.
And you guys, you do play together every once in a while, right? Maybe when you cross paths. I mean, you're still in touch with him quite often.
Yeah, I talked to him just a couple of days ago. We haven't played together in quite a while because we don't tour anymore. But we have played together in Florida and in New York, and also in England when we finally signed a bigger record deal.
Thank you for bringing that up, because my next thing that I was going to ask you, it's kismet how that works out. But the next thing I was going to ask you, one of the videos I saw that was one of my favorite things when you folks went to be on Jools Holland.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me how that happened? How did you get on the Jools Holland show? And I like the logistics of that show too, so I'd just like to speak a little bit about that once you're done. But how did you get to Jools? Because of that record being released in the UK, the one that's lost now here?
Yes, which was our third album. We made a second album the same way, except the second album we used 1/2-inch 8-track instead of 1/4-inch. But it was still recorded in Robert's Den, and it still got good press, and we still toured, and that's still as far as we could get. And the second album had been released in England on Rough Trade, and I just thought, why don't I call Jeff Travis at Rough Trade and see if he has any idea of where we could go from here. We had cut ties with our American label, and Jeff was really helpful, and he said, I'll ask around. And I said East West, didn't I? It was released on Blanco y Negro, which was Jeff Travis's label. But he was also involved with East West, which was a Warner's label in London. And he did find someone there who was very interested in doing an album, and we signed with them. And so we had a little money for once, and guiding assistants, an actual A&R guy. We still recorded in Robert's Den, though, and still recorded on 8-track. Still mixed it in Toronto, the same as we had the second album.
And the second album was Please Panic, right?
Please Panic.
Please
Right.
Panic.
1992. And the third album was Opposite Sex, which was released in 1995. But it was a fiasco in terms of the American release. We wanted it to be released on Warner Brothers, who were interested, and they said, well, no, there's a pecking order. It's got to be on Elektra. And we had heard horror stories, or at least bad rumors about Elektra, that they were changing their president and she didn't like rock and roll. And that's exactly what happened. And she cut like 20 bands from the roster, us included, and the album never came out in the US.
And that was Opposite Sex. Was that the record Opposite Sex?
Yes.
So that was in the can. That thing was done, right?
Oh, yeah.
It had been released in Europe.
It had already been released, and that was when the Jools Holland show came up. The label basically arranged for us to be on that. So we traveled to London, and we did that show, and we did a live show.
So Elektra had the tapes, had the thing in their hand, and they just dropped you guys at that point, right?
Yeah, and that's pretty much was the end of we couldn't get another label interested. We were told, yeah, once you're dropped by a major, nobody else really wants to touch it. And yeah, that was just kind of the end of the line. We still play, but it was almost immediately more of a sideline, more of a hobby thing.
For us people that like media, for us that like to hold the media in our hand, is there any chance of getting Opposite Sex? Is it out there? Is it on Amazon? Any idea?
You can get, it was re-released. All 3 albums were re-released about 4 years ago by a German label. You can get it on vinyl. It's there. The label is called Play Loud.
Mm-hmm.
It's not available on CD. I think the first 2 albums still are available on CD, I think. I know You and Your Sister is. But Opposite Sex has never been released on CD here.
So tell me real quick about the Jools Holland show, because right when HDTV came out, he was like one of the first shows in HDTV. So I was watching his show every week, and he had a real eclectic mix of artists that were on that show. And I'm like a recording geek and that sort of stuff. So it seems to me like when you went to do that show, it seems there's a bunch of bands there, right? They're kind of in a circle or a semicircle.
Yep.
How did that work? And did you guys get like a 10 by 10 and then they moved to the other group? And then how did that work?
Yeah, pretty much. And you got to do 2 songs, but not back to back. Everybody did 1 song in the first half of the show and then a second song. So we were on same episode with Paul Weller, Joan Armatrading, Supergrass. I think those are the main big names that were there. But it was, super weird to be on a show with those lineups.
Very, very eclectic. And that would probably have been like 95 then, right? 1995?
Yep.
So I just watched a bit of that video, and I was always intrigued by the way they set that up, because when the other band is playing, are you just sitting there watching them and with the people behind you and stuff, right?
Yep, that's it. That's right.
Yeah, the one thing, once we knew that Dale was going to be on, is there's a lot of stuff on YouTube, which is so great now, Dale, that we can actually, I'm surprised there are even people back in the 90s that were doing their homemade videos of Gizmo songs. I watched a few of those that got filmed in Bloomington, and they're, the stuff that you recorded in the TV WTTV Channel 4 studio, that is just a treasure trove of stuff, because, people of our age, there are no pictures. There are no videos for a lot of bands. I mean, there are bands that have played, for 10 years that never had a recording, never had a photo taken of them. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, now people have their cameras and everything. If somebody special like Lou Reed played at the Bluebird with John Mellencamp, there's like one fuzzy, grainy film of that. And it's very,
I know that it's not that.
Yeah, I love the fact that you guys have some material out there that people can actually watch. It's fantastic. So one thing about, I do want to play a Volker Boatman song, and I think it might be a good idea to do it now. And as I talked to Dale earlier, I hope we don't get into copyright problems, because that's not what we're trying to do. And I figure since we have the guy here that probably
I won't sue you,
was at least co-writer or something like that, I figured we could take a look at that. And I just need to pull that up real quick. And I'm not having any luck doing that. I had everything set up, and here it is. So bear with me. And the Jools Holland video, we did have that, but it's just the video is just a little bit grainy. I'd much rather do this one, because I think the video and the sound on this one are awesome. So let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick.
Take my hand, it's a compliment. Every time we leave, and the sky turns blue on the east inside. When the work was done, it made sense to me. Rode the train into Morristown. It's a business trip. There's a station there. It couldn't be my fault. It couldn't be my fault. We're gonna try somewhere. We're gonna try somewhere. It seems like you want me to be like you want me. It seems like you want me to be like you want. We're gonna try somewhere. We're gonna try somewhere. We're gonna try somewhere. We're gonna try somewhere. If she comes round, it's gonna help him better. If he comes round, it's gonna help him better. If we come round, it's gonna help him better. If we come round, it's gonna help him better. We gonna try somewhere. Gonna try somewhere. We're gonna try somewhere. We're gonna try somewhere. Outside your door, almost halfway there. Wish you'd be like me, and I can hear your heart, and I can hear your heart. We're gonna try somewhere, we're gonna try somewhere.
Well, I have to tell you, I love the sound and I love the video on that one. It's really really high quality. So tell me about that. Did you guys just decide, hey, let's do a great video shot of the stuff we have, or how did that come about?
We had no idea anyone was filming it. It was just somebody. What was his name on there? Baumgartner.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Anyway, no, it just showed up on YouTube. He did 2 songs that night. No, it wasn't us. It wasn't our idea. It was just somebody that knew what they were doing.
It looks great. The sound, it's got to be taken from the board, right? That's got to be a board recording, do you think?
I don't know.
Because
I don't
it's
know
fantastic.
for sure if it's or not. Yeah,
I strongly suggest people look this one up, because it's just a great performance. And also to look up the patio videos too are a little more less high def, I guess to say, but they're still great performances. So
I should mention who was on in the video besides myself. It was Matt Speak on lead guitar, Jake Smith on bass, and Andy Richards playing drums.
Fantastic. And it sounded great. Just a fantastic thing. And I was reading up on the Vulgar Boatmen, and it said that's a great car driving song. That's a great driving song, like Sniffing the Tears or something like that, like your song here too is. And I read somewhere where the Vulgar Boatmen love to sing about love and driving, or love and cars. Does that, where did the driving thing come? Where did that get planted in your head? Driving to South Central High School to go to school every day for 20 minutes?
I doubt it. I'm not sure. I think we both, Robert and I both, knew that lyrics about cars and lyrics about girls have always worked really well in rock and roll. And driving is kind of an evocative topic. You can use it to think or to travel, or. And Drive Somewhere was the hit that we had on XRT in the summer of 1990. It ended up at the end of the year being one of their 5 top requested songs. But I think the reason for that was that the label that we were on with the first album, it was so tiny, they couldn't keep the record in stock. We could have sold more records if they could have gotten the records, the CDs, to the stores in Chicago. But since they couldn't, people would call XRT and ask to hear it that way.
Nice. Whatever it takes, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Chicago has always been historically, and you and I are both WLS aficionados, has always been a hotbed for breaking, regional type bands, really big in the 60s doing that. Sure. But because of the drive, yeah, exactly. Because of the driving thing, leads me to ask about the long lost documentary that was done about the Vulgar Boatmen, and like the only shot of that I've seen is you people in a car driving, of course. What was that based on? Your last show? Were you on your way to your last show? What was the driving thing behind that video?
It was supposed to be. As it turned out, it really wasn't our last show, so it was kind of a big lie. But it was a documentary that a fan in Chicago wanted to make, named Fred Uter is his name. And it was done just before we lost our bass player for a few years, because he got a teaching job in Nottingham, England. And so he was moving, and we thought it might be our last show. And Fred just took that and ran with it. And I didn't know it was long lost. I'll try to find out where you can get it, because I know it is still available.
Yeah, for the people watching on YouTube, maybe if you can put that in the comments, maybe where it can be found, so people can follow that up. Because I've clicked on a couple of dead links that went to nowhere, because I wanted to see if it was on Amazon or somewhere like that we could buy it and watch it. But yeah, in fact, the folks that are watching during this broadcast, the live broadcast, and the rerun that we're going to put on later, make sure you hit like and subscribe to our channel, because we'll be doing a lot of this stuff coming up. But also, what is the current state of the Vulgar Boatmen? Are the people in Florida still doing stuff? Are you guys meeting up, or what exactly is going on with the two areas there?
No, the Florida franchise is kind of at a standstill, and we're all but at a standstill. We play, a handful of shows a year, maybe 3 or 4, and we haven't played in 2 years now because of the pandemic. But we are playing Shubas again in January. We have a standing date there every January. And we're playing on January 29th at Shubas. That'll be our first show in 2 years. And I hope everyone can make it out.
That would be great. Do you think is there any rust? Do you have to break any rust off to get back into the thing, to remember the words?
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to think about it and brush up a little bit. But that's one great thing, is we're always a little rusty anyway, so it won't be that big of a change.
It gets too refined and too much sheen on it, right? If you practice it to death, right?
Or at all.
So going on things that are long lost, can you tell me if there's any Gizmo stuff coming up? Are there songs in the vault? I don't want to keep you here much too longer. We're almost done, but I'm just wondering, we'd love to see Gizmo stuff. Is it stuff that you're working on now, maybe new Gizmos, or is it stuff that's been in the vault for a while?
It's coincidentally enough, there is a Gizmos album about to be released. I can't imagine there'll be another one after this, but Gulcher is releasing an album of the stuff that we did when we were in New York. A lot of which, the studio stuff, people have already if they want it, but it's being supplemented by demos and live material, all from the 1.5 years that we were active in New York. So, and it's called The Gizmos in New York, and it'll be available online and as a cassette release.
Nice.
Gulcher is choosing to do that, and I think it'll be out before the end of November. It certainly could be anyway, because it doesn't take very long to manufacture cassettes.
And I'm surprised to hear Gulcher. I didn't know that it was still a functioning label. What's the story there?
Well, it was not a functioning label all this time, but at some point in the last 20 years, Bob Richard, who was Mr. Gulcher, dug all of his tapes out of his closet and started reissuing them on CD. And that led to, he started putting out some new stuff on CD. Some of which was archival, like the Walking Ruins, a Bloomington band. He released their most popular album, and a lot of it was brand new stuff as well. He put out one of the Tim Carroll albums, who was again the Gizmos main guitarist when we were. So yeah, Gulcher is still kicking.
I think that's some great news, because I think a lot of people that are going to be watching this on the Indiana Rock Machine are going to go, hey, that's great. We can dig some of that stuff up again. And I learned it today. So thank you so much for bringing that up. That's awesome. I just want to talk probably the last thing. If we have any questions, people are more than welcome to key in their questions here. But you played around Indianapolis, played around Bloomington, played in Lafayette. Can you give me something? And I know you played a lot in the patio. Do you have a patio story or a recollection of the patio? I know we just lost the owner of the patio just recently. Can you give us a quick story about the patio?
I don't know as a story, but I certainly miss the patio. I mean, it was our favorite place to play. It was a perfect sized room. Things sounded great there. It was never too clean. It was just really comfortable. It was just the right size. Much preferred it to playing at the Vogue. Although the Vogue let us open for Bo Diddley once, I got to give him props there. But we always preferred the patio. And yeah, I wish it were still around.
I remember the patio having a real low stage. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it wasn't very high.
Yeah,
it wasn't like the Vogue stage. No, it was maybe 2 feet high, possibly.
Yeah. Did you run into any problems with people trying to come up and sing with you at the patio because it was such a low stage?
No.
So, what was anything you said at the Vogue? You opened for Bo Diddley there,
Mhm.
and what
Yeah.
band was that? What band were you in that
The,
did
the
that?
Vulgar Boatman.
Okay,
Yeah, it wasn't in the 50s. It was.
I'd hope
But
not.
yeah, I got to shake his hand, and he's certainly a hero of mine. So
Nice, because that's one of the songs that you mentioned at the very beginning. Hearing that record, I think was one of the Bo Diddley songs. Yeah, and one of our friends, Todd, is saying he's bringing up the memory of there was a pole in the middle of the patio stage, was there not?
yeah, there there was some in the middle of the club too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if they finally did away with that pole or not. But no, I know what he's referring to. Yeah.
Because that's an invitation to dance. If you ask me, if there's a pole up there, I'm ready to go dance. That's all it takes. What about you had a story about the Bluebird real quick. What was your memory of the Bluebird? Did you play there once, you said?
We played there once, and that may have been the transition band with Ted. But in any event, they said, no, we don't want you here again. And then we played at that Battle of the Bands. So I think I said that story.
Yeah, well, we talked about that real quick ahead of time, but there was a Battle of the Bands going on in Bloomington. So what was that? You were playing at the Bluebird a couple bands a night. How was that working?
Yeah, but we did tell the story.
We did when we were boning up on our pre-interview.
I think we did again.
Okay, well then we did. I'm happy with that. But yeah, the Battle of the Bands would often result in. I worked on one of the first Live from Bloomington albums. It was a compilation that we did. I was on that board that we went over the songs. That was always interesting to get because a lot of those people that recorded those songs for that Best of Bloomington, that was their only time in the studio with that group of people. So that was always a big deal for them. And, that was fantastic. So, I don't think we have any other questions. So Dale, I would really like to thank you for joining us tonight. The stories have been fantastic. Hopefully we can find out in the comments below if we can watch that Vulgar Boatman documentary.
Yeah, I'll find it.
Would love to see that. And for the people watching, the Gizmos, all you do is put Gizmos in Bloomington in there, and you will get a good search result of a lot of videos on YouTube of Dale and his group doing a lot of good songs. You'll also see a couple of videos of the earlier version of the Gizmos. There are a few songs on there too. So Dale, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Indiana Rock Machine for joining us today. Enjoyed talking to somebody else from LaPorte County, keeping it real in the state of Indiana. And
in that first version of the Gizmos that I played in, where I answered the ad, the other guitarist was from New Carlisle.
Wow. So we could all go to Miller's and have the buffet on Sunday afternoon. That would be perfect.
Yeah.
That was our trip on Sundays. We got to go there. So once again, Dale is in Indianapolis. Thank you for joining us by the internet, Dale. We appreciate it. And I owe you a pair of White Sox tickets for appearing tonight on the show.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
So hopefully we'll see you in January.
Yep, January at Shuba's.
Okay, have a great night. Happy holidays, and I hope the folks back home enjoy your visit. And that does it for us tonight, folks. Make sure you watch us. Make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you hit like and leave your comments below. And we will be back again for another show. Thanks again, everybody.